Cliffs is a wonderful place to live. Nothing like it anywhere else in the world. We're very, very fortunate and blessed to be residents of the Cliffs. Welcome to the museum honoring members of the Catawba Island or the Catawba Cliffs. Thank you.
And it was, cliffs were run down. I mean, no, it was a terrible.
Is that true?
place to live. Yeah,
or she's laughing.
There were no.
I'm laughing because
the roads were terrible. The buses were not going to deliver the kids, and the mail people said they weren't going to deliver the mail back there unless they do something with the roads.
Do you remember that old limestone kiln that was
Yes,
there? Did you
yes.
climb on it when you were young? And I used to climb on that thing.
We never did, but our sons did.
You probably didn't like that, did you? Because it's kind of dangerous.
We never knew about it at the time.
Yeah, nor about jumping off the cliff.
Yes.
By Nabagon. That's a big thing.
My husband was here as a kid, and they used to check out the caves and stuff that used to be around.
Yeah.
He liked, I think he practically lived on the lake. He had a little rowboat that he would
I go out to Mouse Island.
Fish. Yeah, he camped at Mouse Island, his senior prom.
Oh, for the senior prom, In fact, my grandson and 3 of his friends just rowed a boat over to Mouse Island Labor Day weekend and hiked around the island. So that's the favorite adventure for our children when they come up, our grandchildren, is to row. It's a blow-up rubber boat, and they row it over to Mouse Island.
Still very natural over there. A lot of rocks and trees and woods.
Right,
and all
yeah,
that.
they just walk around and
A lot of mosquitoes. And stuff.
right, they see some leftover fire pits.
Like what we call Hidden Beach.
Why is it hidden? Anybody can see it.
It used to be hidden. It was always hidden.
Hidden from what?
From the road, with all the trees that were growing up along there,
Neat. These are great pictures.
These are really nice pictures.
These are great pictures.
Well, Bill and Kathy Smith, and we moved to the Cliffs in 1977. Our kids were small. The neighborhood was one of a lot of families with kids growing up. And that's probably the biggest change over the years, is now we've become probably almost more seasonal homes than permanent homes, and we lost all the kids in the neighborhood. And now we're finally starting to see more.
Oh, the kids.
Yeah,
Kids are
perfect place to raise a family. Perfect place.
Hi, I'm Kathy Hoppy Holbrook, and I grew up in Catawba Cliffs. We moved here from Michigan when I was only 4 years old, and I was one of the ones that almost learned how to swim before they walked. But most of us that grew up around Terrace Circle spent half of our day in the water at the end of the road, and many stories come out of there. One in particular makes me laugh when I think about it. I would love to go down and I'd swim by myself, and I'd swim way out, far into the lake, you know, past the shores, and the boats would be between me and the land. And I remember one time, one summer, a tourist stopped and they turned their motor off and they yelled at me and said, "You need to get back into there before somebody runs over you." Thankfully, nobody ever ran over me. One summer, David Malefchik was cliff climbing with us down by the arch. And he actually got stuck hanging by one hand from the cliff. And I remember running all the way home to Malefchik's house to get Arnold and his father. And his father ran back so fast that he was out of wind. But David, thankfully, was rescued. Come to think of it, David got into a lot of trouble. He set the woods on fire. You know, the one where the pond is, and the township has a path around it now. I'm not sure if he did it with matches or magnifying glasses, but the fire trucks had to come. He got in trouble that day. I wouldn't know where to stop because growing up in Catawba was a safe place. Everybody's parents were your parents. All the adults looked out for us. It wasn't unusual to even get spanked by a neighboring parent if we stepped out of line or did something wrong. I think that all of us who grew up there we are raised by the community of Catawba Cliffs, and the special bond we hold still exists to the day. Thank you.
I don't really have a story about the Cliffs. All I know is when...
Well, you lived there.
Yeah, but I just moved there recently.
Oh, I thought you were...
I was born and raised at Kelly's.
Kelly's Island? Oh.
And I used to remember my dad and his brothers talking about the rum runners and how they would come from Kelly's
Didn't they stop over at Middle Island over there between Peely's?
No,
Because that was still Canada.
And they would hide the booze in barns, in soap boxes, with hay in them. And that's how they transported them in those runabouts. A picture over there of the runabout?
Yeah.
That's exactly what they used.
Did they have to throw their booze over if the Coast Guard was coming? Like,
No, they didn't. No, they knew them. Yeah, there wasn't
a lot of that.
a lot of that, but they did, do everything they could to secure, their packages.
Yeah.
I'm Nancy Kirshner Hurl.
And you lived in the Cliffs?
I lived at 4464 East Cliff Road.
When?
And my father bought the home in 1957. And we moved in. We originally lived in Sandusky. I was going in the 6th grade at the old school.
Okay,
Schoolhouse Road, yes, the original one that was built. Yes, yes, and we went to the old section of the original school that was built back in the 1900s. And we started 6th grade, and we finished to 8th grade, and then from 8th grade, we then went on to Port Clinton for our high school years.
So tell me, like, when you would come home from school, or even in the summer, what kinds of things would you do?
We would have a riot because Gloria Dinos' dad built a great big platform for us kids to swim off of, and every day we had it down. We called it Boldy's Beach. I think now people call it Hidden Beach, but it was Boldy's Beach in front of John Boldy, John's house. And we would take off in the morning and we'd swim from 10 o'clock until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Diving, swimming, just having a riot.
Did you dive off the rocks?
Never.
Off those cliffs.
No, we were never allowed to. No, none of us did. That was something that came later with the new generations that were coming up. But we never, like where the Nabagon, I would never think about that.
Why not?
Oh, for God's sakes, there's big boulders down there. Okay. Yeah, and then in the wintertime, or down there's a lot of little alcoves in the cliff area that we would go into and we'd hide.
Yeah.
If we didn't want to be seen or whatever. Down in Boldy's Beach, there's one around the corner there. There was a cave that was closed in by the fire department by East Cliff or East Terrace Circle. The guy that is on the right-hand side, the fire department closed that in. But when we were kids, we could actually enter it from the ground and go out to the water.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Neat.
Yes.
Didn't you have to worry about rattlesnakes? I
Yes.
There were a lot of rattlesnakes.
There was, when I would ride my bike down on East Terrace Circle and go around to where Bomberas lived and go down to the other, where they have the gate now, the back gate by Way Road. There, one day I rode my bike and there was a rattlesnake out in the middle of the road. And I had to be careful, because my parents would always tell us to be careful in that region. And then I kept on going, and then where Cindy Boldy's house is now, it used to be all rocks then. We were always told not to go in those rocks because there could be rattlesnakes in there. And then the first time I ever saw a deer down at the water, down at Boldy's Beach, was probably in the early 70s. One day I was sitting there and a deer came out from nowhere, which we never saw a deer when we were growing up back in the 50s. And he went down to the water's edge and then came back up, went back in the woods. And then we would ice fish in the wintertime. John Boldy had his ice shanty, Lanny Kohanke, all of us would go ice fishing.
Were the winters more severe?
Oh yes, our winters were brutal back then. Oh, we would ride our bikes and we'd go up to Cook's Dairy Bar, come home, think nothing of it. But the winters were a lot brutal. I mean, the lake was solid.
It was kind of exciting though.
It was frozen, yeah. And that'd be our whole ice skating rink. We'd get off the bus from school, grab our skates, and out we go to the front
Go out
door.
on the lake?
Oh yeah.
What's your mom
We would
upset?
She
didn't know, did she?
yeah, they knew, but you know, it was
different time.
we just knew that it was frozen. We wouldn't go if we heard cracks, but we would skate from John Boldy's house all the way down to the ferry. My mom was Dorothy Kirshner, and she taught kindergarten to a lot of children, and she loved being a teacher and teaching children on Catawba Island School.
Well, my name is Craig Corporal. I'm the president of the Historical Society, and numero uno is to say thank you for all coming here tonight. We really have been anxious to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the Cliffs. This was one of the very first exhibits that we did at the museum, and I hope you all saw the Cliffs exhibit. And Rick Thomas, where's Rick? Rick, you still out here? Rick, our museum designer, was the one who sorted out, pulled up a lot of that information, and we're hoping that we'll get more from you now that you've gone through this 100-year anniversary process, and we'll get an opportunity to upgrade it as we go along. There are a number of things that this place is called. Union Chapel is what a lot of the old-timers know it as. It's the Catawba Museum at Union Chapel for those who are involved with the Historical Society. And those of us who spend most of our time here refer to it as the place that Jane runs. Where is Jane? Here she is, right here. I think it's important to understand there's a time and a place to recognize the talents of the people that you associate yourself with. And this, with the Cliffs being what it is, her neighborhood, it's a perfect time to say thank you to you, Jane, for all that you do to make this place work. She has a crew of cohorts from your neighborhood that have been involved with making this happen. Judy Thompson, Kathy Holbrook, one of our board members, Sue Mooney, and Michelle Martin. Are you all, everybody still here? Just stick your hand up and wave. Yeah. I hope I got all the Cliffs people that helped on this. Oh, here, Marlene Boulis right here. Absolutely correct. These are the people who made this happen in conjunction with Jane. So, all right, remarks will be brief. Going through the museum, I hope you notice that we've attempted to be meticulous in our attention to details. Details play a very particular role in relating history. It couldn't have come through to me more clearly than it did last weekend when I took that boat out into Lake Erie to see the place where the Battle of Lake Erie took place. And if it hadn't been for one tiny little detail, the change in the direction of the wind, the whole history of this country would be different. Because that wind changed, Commodore Perry was able to drive through the British lines and took out the British fleet, and we're not having to sing God Bless the Queen today. Okay? A little closer to home, the Cliffs. In 1850, a guy named J.R. James got a bright idea. He said, you know, cement is a big deal in this area. And there's a lot of rock on Catawba Island that seems to be available for lease. So he leased up a lot of that stone right down at the end of the road here, right at the entrance to the Cliffs. And he built a limestone kiln. Everybody that lives in the Cliffs knows about that limestone kiln. 5 years later, they realized the one detail they didn't take into account was the rock on Catawba is not the same kind of rock that's used to make cement. There's a magnesium ion in the rock that exists on Catawba Island, and it was not very popular among the people who made cement. So 5 years later, by 1885, that business folded. If that hadn't happened, if he had paid attention to that detail, you would have had a neighborhood in there a lot sooner than you did under Josiah Bellows. If it had worked, imagine every morning you'd be driving through that north gate and there'd be a guard for a cement company saying, welcome, welcome here. So those are the kinds of details that make some difference for us. One last one that tickles me is a walk in the woods. There was a guy living in North Carolina whose name was Samuel Murray. In 1802, he bought a piece of property just south of Asheville, North Carolina, and he was strolling through the woods there, and he came across a vine that he didn't recognize. Turned out that that vine was Vitis labrusca, which is what we all know today as the Catawba grape. First time it was discovered. So this guy takes his vines down to South Carolina. They go from there up to Washington, D.C., from there to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati ultimately to here. By the 1860s, there wasn't a vacant piece of property on Catawba Island that didn't have grape arbors planted on it. You've heard about the gold rush? Well, there was a grape rush at that time. People really believed they could make their fortunes just by planting grape arbors on their property. Well, as we all know, they didn't take into account the fact that there were diseases and things like that. And they also didn't take into account that the market says what works and what doesn't. And grapes turned into peaches, and peaches became our fame, and life went on. But it doesn't change the fact that we are called Catawba Island because of the Catawba grape. That's the real story, the Catawba grapes, not the Catawba Indians. Catawba Indians live down in the South Carolina area. Okay? Well, those are some of the details that we tried to deal with here in the museum, and we can do this because of your support. The community, when we talked about this idea of having a museum, we said, do we want to charge admission or not? And philosophically, the board decided it was not fair to put a financial barrier between history and the people who created that history. So instead, we developed a membership model to make this place work. That's how we fund it, with our memberships. So, at the risk of sounding like the commensurate, or not commensurate, I don't know what a word is that I ought to use here, the fundraiser par excellence that I am, I'm hoping that all of you who are not currently members of our association will give it a thought, give it a try, see what you think about becoming a member, because that's what keeps the doors open. Again, we thank you for your support, and we hope that you've had a good time this evening. If there's anything more that we can do to make this a more pleasant evening, please look for the board members. They've all got name tags on. And again, talk to Jane, because she's got the answers. DK?
Yeah. I'm the artist who painted the paintings that are up for grabs. Mm-hmm. If you sign up as a Navigon member, mm-hmm.
Right,
I will do a painting of your home on the cliffs gratis.
Oh. Wow, Nika, am I allowed to hug you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
As she points out, we're doing a special drawing just for the Cliffs membership. You can find the big painting over there will go to the new Navigon member who signs up between now and November 1st. There's other paintings and other prizes over there for other membership. So stop by the table, talk with Bill Vandergeest or me. We'll fill you in on how it all works. Thank you all. I can't believe that.